Okay, this is Thursday night, the 19th, but I want to kind of go through a little experience I had with a project that I had to finish last night and this morning and today. This is a little set of drawings. My job was to take a design that a guy that I'm mentoring had designed for a two-story deck addition with a covered second floor with a couple of dormers. Basically, the owner said, I like this photograph. I want to add this onto the back of my house. And I kind of coached this guy in putting together a set of drawings. He used AutoCAD. He had taken my Revit class. He's done Revit work, but he wasn't confident enough in Revit. So what I got from him, I'm going to see if I can just open. Oh, I didn't copy the AutoCAD file over. Let me just open up in Revit what I did. I actually opened a test file because I wasn't sure. He has the student version of AutoCAD, and maybe I shouldn't go into detail about this on the recording, but but only you guys can see it anyway. He sent me just an AutoCAD file he put together. It wasn't his final drawing, but it was just an AutoCAD file. And if you open one of the student version Revit files or AutoCAD files in AutoCAD or Revit on a machine that has the fully licensed version, it gets basically polluted by that stamp that says this is an academic version only. So if you go to print an AutoCAD file out of AutoCAD that has that, you'll see this big stamp, and there's no way to remove it once you've opened a file that has that. It's not like it pollutes your machine for all other files. It stays in that file. So you never want to have a project from work that you take home and open up the file in your student version of AutoCAD or Revit and then take back to work and say, okay, can we work on this, because that file is forever stuck. What I was curious about. Oh, okay. I don't want. Okay. VXF will get around? Okay. That's a good point. But a Revit file, there's no workaround. Because once it has that stamp, if you print from Autodesk Revit.
Is that what that black thing was in my PDF?
Yeah.
On the border?
And I don't grade off for that because I want you to be able to use the student version, but there's no way to get that out unless you use, if you use some other program to mask it out. I won't even suggest what programs, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what I was afraid of is if I take his AutoCAD file, and I didn't even think about the DXF, but I don't even have AutoCAD on my machine. I've kind of turned my back on AutoCAD as far as running it. So I tried importing his AutoCAD file into Revit, and I made my own little project just for that because I didn't want to pollute my, let me get to the right folder here. So I had this calcs file. I'll go ahead and open that up. It had no Revit model information. I was basically just using this as a tool to put together sheets and print them because I know Revit so well, and I know it's the best tool for that. And I wanted to put a foundation plan together from this AutoCAD file. So I created another file, and by the way, I did determine that when I imported his student version AutoCAD DWG, it did not affect when I printed from my Revit file. So the imported DWG file being student version doesn't pollute the Revit file that it's imported into, and that's good to know. Of course, I'm not suggesting or advocating bypassing licensing to use for commercial purposes because that's not legal. But if I go to the floor plan here, let's go to the new architectural floor plan. This is what the AutoCAD file looked like. And as we learned actually last Tuesday, when you import AutoCAD, you can select it, you can query it, you can pick a layer and say, okay, what layer is that line on? That's in the A-column arch view. So then I could go into VG and I could say, okay, under that first floor plan, I want the A-column arch layer to be overridden to be a darker color, like maybe purplish red. So I changed the columns. So there's certain things you can do with AutoCAD. What I ended up doing, though, and this is just, again, if you're good at column grids, placing columns, it took me very little time to do all this. I came back and I put Revit column grids on top of his AutoCAD file. And I struck where I wanted the column grids. I numbered them. I was able to toggle the bubbles left and right. And what I put together was this foundation plan. And I'm not showing any of the AutoCAD in this view. I'm just showing nothing but flat Revit stuff. I've got column grids, I've got some dash detail lines, and then I have a real footing. It's a structural foundation, and then I have a real concrete column, and then I have a real timber post that's a structural column. And then this pier, and pier is a family I had to build because Revit doesn't give you a good drilled pier family. And so I placed that, I put some detail lines, and I said you have to remove the joist to dig a new footing. This is a mess. It's a ground level deck that they want to add onto, so we have to dig a couple footings under this deck, and they can climb under here and dig that one, but they have to open up the deck. Anyway, it looks complicated, but it's nothing but a flat drawing, and if I go to the 3D view of it, you'll see there's the AutoCAD, there's the two floor plans in AutoCAD, and there's the line work in that AutoCAD file floating up at level 2, because he's looking down at the deck from level 2. So it's kind of taking a two-dimensional drawing and kind of plopping it in 3D, but by no means did I build the house in 3D in Revit. But I was able to build the footings, those columns that sit on the footings. Now this column actually should have stopped where that one ended. So that top of that round column goes up to 6'5" above the lower floor. So this one should start from the lower floor up 6'5". So now that wood post really sits on top of that column. And so I was able to work all this geometry out, and really all I needed to do was work out a way to put footings under here and make sure that those footings could be built next to the existing drilled piers. So it's purely a structural exercise. And then I put together this, there were two sheets in here, in this file, my finished foundation plan, that had my title block and everything, and then I put together this framing elevation. Now on that, I took a printout of his AutoCAD drawing. I didn't even have the AutoCAD DWG of that, but he had sent me a PDF that I printed and I traced over it. I did that hand-traced drawing in about 5 or 10 minutes before I left home. I slapped it on the scanner and scanned it. Then I went to a south elevation, new south, and I copied that, and so, or actually new east, I'm sorry. So then I duplicated that and I inserted the hand drawing as a scan, scaled it up so it lined up with the column grids, it lines up with the levels. So my little hand sketch lines up with the deck level 1 level, even though it's sloppily hand drawn, a little crooked. I probably should have rotated that thing, but it works. And then the second floor and the roof plate height. And then I labeled 2x12s, 2x8s, spacers, through bolts, all the structural stuff. And that ended up getting put on a sheet that looks like that. And it printed just fine as a PDF. It's got my notes. I was much faster at putting in the text notes in Revit and the pointers than I could have hand-drawn it, made it readable, and then scanned it all. And I was going to be leaving home, so I couldn't scan it later. I sat at lunch somewhere else and added the text. Then I went back to that other file. Actually, I'm going to close hidden. So there's the file that I had done the structural calcs in, and all I did, I have this little program. It runs on top of Excel, and I give it the beam reactions and the uniform load and the supports and the distances and the cross-section of the beam, and it gives me calculation results. Then I did my hand calcs like I used to do when I was a structural engineer, and this was an isometric drawing that I traced on top of. This was some of my hand calcs here. I just scanned that little piece of paper and imported it in right on the sheet. Here's another one of those that I scanned, and it's readable. I made a PDF of it. It's on grid paper. And then I have analysis results from the various, that was actually more up to date here. Oops. There's the calcs for the footings and the foundations, the beams. And then here's some of those analysis results. So this thing spits out the calculated stresses, the beam reactions, and it checks it and says the deflection is below the allowable limit. And I just put that in my notes, and I printed all this stuff. I ended up with 10 sheets, made PDFs, emailed it. I didn't touch a piece of paper since like 6:30 or 7 this morning, and I still I get amazed by what you can do with Revit and mixed media and all this stuff. So you don't have to think in terms of, oh, I got to build everything in 3D. I get so caught up in it, it's going to take me forever. Get as good as you can at Revit and think about ways you can use it to shortcut and just do what you need it to do. Because the trap in Revit is that you can fall into this idea of I got to build everything perfectly. And I could have very easily fallen into that trap and said, okay, in this 3D view, Oops, I'm in the wrong file. I said, okay, I want to see that back wall. I want to see the doors and windows, but I held myself back and I just did what I needed. And nobody knows the difference. They probably wouldn't even realize it was done in Revit. But again, I could have never done this in AutoCAD. No matter how fast I'm at AutoCAD, even though I'm a little rusty, it's just there's no match because things were coordinated, the elevation lined up with the plan, the grids lined up, and simple things like that you take for granted. But, you know, if I'd gone to this east elevation with those grids and I turned off certain grids because I didn't need to see those two, and I go back to the foundation plan that I did, and I tile those, I know, I'm confident, I don't even think about it, that the B and the C.5 and the E grids are the right spacing. So it's the coordination, even between very simple drawings, that Revit is good at, that I continue to enjoy, to learn different ways I can kind of use it for a bag of tricks. So just wanted to share that with you. I encourage you again to try what you can. Another example I might have mentioned to you is if you want to use Revit for something that you're doing an AutoCAD project on, try building a roof in Revit for a little house you might be designing, or your own house, and use Revit to work out the valleys and the ridges on a roof that maybe has a couple gables or whatever, and spit it out to AutoCAD. Then you've saved yourself time because unless it's just a very simple roof, Revit is very good at figuring out the overhangs and all that stuff. You can spit it out to an AutoCAD file, which I haven't really covered, but that's actually easy to do. You go to your Purple R and you do an export, and you go to CAD, DWG, and then it'll make a layer for the walls, a layer for the doors, a layer for the windows. And if you don't go in and customize it, it's going to use basically the National CAD Standard, which is AIA's CAD Layer Guidelines. And there's a whole history with that. I was actually on the National CAD Standard Committee and met in Washington to work out what essentially was layering standards that they used for AutoCAD. But that's been incorporated into, to some degree, AutoCAD and Revit. So spitting out to AutoCAD is a breeze in Revit. And it comes out and you can use the layers and you're done. And so I encourage you to fool with that. And I find that I've been able to work without even having a copy of AutoCAD because I can export to AutoCAD, I can import back into Revit, I can communicate with consultants that way. And I like the way I do VG with the layers in an AutoCAD file in Revit, so there's no need for me to open it in AutoCAD. Unless I had to physically go into the AutoCAD file and delete some lines. And I could even do that by deleting the layers in Revit, spitting it back out as another AutoCAD file. So it's pretty amazing what you can do. So I just wanted to kind of share that. I'm going to stop that and save it because we are going to spend the rest of our time just doing an animation. So this is session 10. I'll call this a mixed media. Yeah, Carol?